architects have it 50% more difficult than marketers because marketers have got price and differentiation. Well, I'm a big believer in storytelling as a way to increase value. You have to look for different ways, the strategies to increase value.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture. I'm your host, Rion Willard, and today I'm delighted to welcome Paul Iddon, the founder of Agency PSI, who bring a truly unique and valuable perspective to the intersection of architecture and marketing. So Paul's remarkable career spans an impressive 22 years in architecture, followed by another 22 years in consumer and B2B branding, marketing, and communications. This dual expertise gives him unparalleled understanding of both the creative and commercial sides of the industry. At the heart of Paul's work is his focus on architects as the core audience of his business. Through Agency PSI, he collaborates closely with manufacturers, helping them achieve the all-important goal of being specified. What makes Paul's journey even more remarkable is that he's the only former architecture practice owner to transition into this specialized role, creating a bridge between architects and the businesses that support them. Paul's deep involvement in the architectural community at both regional and national levels ensures he stays at the forefront of industry insights, trends, and behavior. And today we discuss a little bit about the positioning of the architect, how we can use behavioral economics, marketing psychology, and marketing strategies to increase and improve the position of the architect, and of course, address that all-important conversation around raising our fees and raising our salaries. So Paul is a favorite of Business of Architecture. This is I'm not even sure, maybe the third or fourth time, probably the fourth time I think he's been on the show. He always provides wisdom and actionable ideas. So sit back, relax. This is going to be a two-parter, and enjoy Paul Iddon. This episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's flagship program to help you structure your firm for freedom, fulfillment, and financial profit. If you want access for our free training on how to do this, please visit smartpracticemethod.com. Or if you want to speak directly to one of our advisors about how he might be able to help you, please follow the link in the information. We are looking for architect developer stories for the Business of Architecture podcast. So, are you an architect developer with valuable insights to share? We're always on the lookout for passionate voices in the industry to join us on the Business of Architecture podcast. If you're ready to share your journey, lessons, strategies with our global audience, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us to explore being a guest on our show and help inspire other architect developers on their path. We'd be interested in hearing your story, whether you're at the very beginning of your development story or whether you have $100 million portfolio of projects already in the bag completed. We'd like to hear from you if you're working with the developers or that you've developed a number of small houses or you're working at a larger scale.
Paul, welcome.
Rion.
Business of Architecture again, one of my favorite BOA guests. Always a pleasure to have you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Ryan. How are you? It's always good to see you. I think this is my third time up. I hope I've got something different to say this time.
I think it is. Is it your third or your fourth?
Oh, I don't know. It could be right.
I'm pretty sure we've had a couple in the studio in the garden before, and then one actually came up to you in Manchester. So
that's right. Yeah, you're right. My memory's going.
There we go. You have been a favorite on the BOA podcast for a number of years. It's always a pleasure to be speaking with you. And
thanks, Ryan.
Today we're going to talk about, I think, fees and salaries in the architecture profession.
Yeah.
And obviously you've recently been elected as in a role at the RIBA. Could you tell us a little bit about what that role is and how you got elected?
Yeah, to be honest, it was advertised that basically there's two seats on the National Council in London that are allotted to the RIBA Northwest, but you can only be elected for those seats in the RIBA Northwest. So I decided to just have a go. I thought I can't wait another 3 years. So it was all a bit last minute, but I decided to stand, and then I had a bit of a campaign. and I won a seat on the fantastic result of 86 seats, 86 votes. So it was 85, which, I mean, the amount of effort per vote. But I'm glad it wasn't just me. But there are two seats, and there were three of us campaigning, and I kind of got the highest vote. And then one of the other existing councillors kept their seat, Chithra Marsh, who's great. She's great, Chithra. And so that means basically I sit on the RIBA Northwest Committee, which is council, which kind of meets every month. And then we have another one at the RIBA in London. And we do some of those live or some of them by Zoom. So, but that's on top of my role as vice president of Manchester Society of Architects. So my wife keeps saying to me, like, "What are you doing?" My kids are going, "Dad, like, what are you doing?" And I went, "Well,
And what's wonderful about this is you're not even a practicing architect these days.
no. I'm one of those weird characters I haven't practiced for donkey's years, but well, at least 25 years. But I'm so embedded in the community because I play a different kind of role. And I think, and I'm really glad to say that, all my colleagues in Manchester and the ones on the Northwest Council, they see it as positive, that they've got somebody who has got a different skill set that's trying to help out. And I feel I suppose I'm at a time in my life, Ryan, where I feel like I need to contribute, give something back. And I'm in a position to do it. And I've got a different kind of outlook. So, yeah, it's keeping me busy. So that's so the role is basically I get to vote on things and get to discuss various things.
Well, I think any platform where we've got kind of someone like yourself with a outside perspective and a deep understanding of architecture, and your perspective as well is very interesting and I think very powerful for the architecture industry in terms of your understanding of behavioral economics, your understanding of marketing, your understanding of business, your understanding of psychology, and we've had that kind of conversation before on the podcast. And as also as it pertains to what we're going to talk about today, salaries and fees, which is often a topic which, I mean, people get very heated about it, and we see it kind of coming up on, it's the favorite of the LinkedIn comment boxes.
Oh,
but there's a bit of a hesitancy on the part of some of our beloved institutions in architecture to be addressing this topic in a meaningful manner.
well, you just observe over the past couple of years, with the Building Safety Act giving new powers to the ARB. I mean, one of the confusing things, a lot of people don't understand the difference between the RIB and the ARB. I have to constantly explain it, not to registered architects, but to other players in the profession. Obviously, being powers granted under the Architects Act of the ARB, and they've increased their fees dramatically, and they're playing a much more sort of hands-on role in validation and certification and things like that, and checking architects. I'm sorry, Ryan, just hold on a second, sir. No problems. Thanks, Doc. This is my wife. She's I'm worried about this. And
Is that your wife's new book?
yeah, my wife and Nick Moss. I didn't write this. This is Nick Moss with Barbara. So, absolutely shameless plug there.
Absolutely, plug it in. We'll put the info into the podcast information into the podcast information.
So the ARB have kind of are all over this, and the RIBA's response is to provide. To their role is obviously they see it as to provide a lot of the CPD content through their platforms, and so the ARB doesn't provide any of that knowledge; it just checks basically. Where the RIBA obviously sees it as an important role in doing that, but we'll talk about almost every subject. But fees and salaries are one that seems to be quite difficult. The ARB won't discuss it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't see it as their role, and they're probably right. although they hold on to the title, protection of title. So the question is to the AIB, are they spending enough time and energy chasing people who abuse the title? But from the RIBA's point of view, obviously they comment on salaries, as we've just seen. An email came out from the president, and about reminding chartered practices on their sort of responsibilities to pay a living wage, especially in London, which is insanely expensive place to live.
Mhm.
But when it comes to fees, it's a much more difficult area, and they do things like guerrilla tactics. They do some CPD content on it, and I suppose where I'm coming from is I think we need something a bit more radical,
Mm.
and we need to look at positioning, and we need to look at strategy, and not just whether we can nudge things up by a percentage or two. And I think the fallout of the golden thread from the Building Safety Act and principal designer does present some opportunities for architects in the UK to actually look at increasing their fee levels.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fair bit of pain that's going to go on with that. But it's going to have to happen. And when there's already quite a bit of pain in the profession already, and I recognise that. So I suppose, from my perspective and the work I do with the society and hopefully with the RIBA, is trying to find solutions for people, especially smaller practices who can't afford to bring people in.
I mean, I think, whenever I look at the RIBA benchmarking statistics, or there's any kind of poll on fees and salaries, I mean, I'm never not shocked by the average wage of a sole practitioner, of which, that makes up a massive chunk of all architects in the UK. I mean, in the US, I was just reading the new AIA report that said 28% of all architects are sole practitioners, and then it was like 75% of all architects are working in a micro practice, basically, or practice under 9 people. And I suspect that the same is when I've read the RIBA reports, it's a very similar sort of percentile. And in the UK, obviously, the last averages were something in the region, was it 26,000 pounds for an architect who's a sole practitioner? That's what they're taking home. That's just barely above your minimum wage. It's just utterly insane. And of course, then there's no frustration. I get messages on LinkedIn all the time from young students who are kind of shocked at how much they're going to get paid. I had a conversation recently with a young lady who was about to embark on an architectural career, and she was all excited and she wanted to get some work experience. And I know her father, and he put me in contact to give her some advice or to help her get some work experience. And of course I said, have you looked at what architects get paid? And she was like, no. And I was like, before you embark on this journey, just have a look. Just have a
Caveat
look.
emptor.
Just have a look, because it's a really long investment in terms of what you're about to put through for your education. You don't know necessarily what it is that you're entering into, and it's a very structured education. And once you're in, the culture of it kind of sucks you forward with blinkers on, and then you're spat out at the other end, and the salary expectations are like, they're just, it's hard. It's very, very difficult. Are you prepared?
I taught to year 6 at School of Architecture, and I asked them, put your hands up, all of those who use Google to find out an architect's salary, average salary. I said I didn't have Google when I did it. I said, could I Googled it? And I found it in 30 seconds. I mean, caveat emptor, like, there's such a thing as contributory negligence. It's like,
Mhm.
if you don't check things out, then that's what you'll look at. I mean, Yeah,
Well, it's
to a
interesting.
extent.
I mean, it's interesting as well because I guess sometimes at that age, you know, if you're going from having no salary ever or not having a job or a paper round to suddenly going to 22K as a young architect, maybe that sounds like a lot of money.
True. It's relative, but yeah, you don't have to go far on social media before you find a lot of information about this and how bad it is.
Yeah.
There are certain people who are very vocal about it. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't tend to post an awful lot about that. I mean, some of the biggest pushers of this are recruitment people.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's a way to, it's a marketing tool for them. But it can really instigate some really unfortunate exchanges on LinkedIn, for instance. And I think that's restrained. I had to remind one person quoting, who was an architectural technologist, that by the comment they just put on, they'd just broken their code of conduct with SEAT. Because there's this kind of pitch battle about the title architect. And, it's like, my view is, look, it's a different training. Okay. You train for a different thing. They're not the same. If you want to train for the title architect, then train for it. Okay. But if you don't want to do it, fair enough. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying you're comparing apples and oranges. But yeah, my issue with all of this is that this is going to get us nowhere. You can have a rant and feel better for about 30 seconds or a minute or an hour. But at the end of the day, it's not going to fix the problem. It reminds me of that scene from Apollo 13. Do you know when they're all in this capsule and they're all having an argument, like 200,000 miles away from the nearest oxygen? And then Tom Hanks playing, Jim Lovell says, "We're not going to do this. We're not going to go bouncing off the walls because we end up exactly where we are." And you just, to me, it's like, well, let's just cut past all of this. We know what the problem is. The question now is, what are the solutions? What can we do? I mean, one solution is to leave the profession. One solution is to sort of transfer into an allied field, project management or design manager or principal designer. But either way, I cannot see a situation where it's not going to result in a drop in supply. The problem is there's the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a discrepancy between what the university's motivations are and the profession's motivation. The university, obviously, it's in their interest to have as many students as possible.
They are, as I think we said before, and they're a business too, and we forget to look at them like a business, and that they're selling a product, and they've catered their product to have it scalable.
The problem with it is that sooner or later, if you're producing loads of product as a business, and then all of a sudden the prices start dropping, then you have to look at it thinking, okay, well, are we overproducing? Is there just not the demand? And if you carry on doing that, you're going to undermine your own business model, which, in any other business, in any other walk of life, that's a major consideration. But it just doesn't seem to be, there's certain things that don't add up. I can't quite, from a psychological point of view, at what point do people think this just isn't worth it? Or they stop and the numbers go down, but I can't see any evidence of that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I suppose that, when I speak with academics, their kind of counterpoint view on it is that, well, and this is quite common view that, well, we're not training people to become architects. We're not creating people. We're not creating people for the profession. And that's where I think there's it's something that lacks a little bit of integrity, or it's dishonest with what's being sold. Then let students know that that, there's often the argument of like, well, we're creating people who can be great generalists and they can go into any other sorts of field, but that's not your experience when you're on an architecture program. Like, the goal is very clearly laid out to become an architect, to go into the profession, and the majority of students who are signing up have got an idea of becoming an architect.
Yeah. If you ask them, let's do a poll. Let's find out what
Yeah.
do you expect to be doing at the end of this. Look, if the argument is, and I can see the university standpoint without being critical, but it's like a history degree or a PPE or English, that they're seen as good analytical training. My son did a history degree, and it's a good training in terms of how to think and communicate. But there's no jobs as sort of like on the tools historians. Well, there's a few podcasts like The Rest Is History and things like that. But it's I saw a joke about this. Did you see it about a person studying Egyptology? And the only future they had was to basically wait for was to wait for a post in teaching Egyptology. And then they described this as literally a pyramid scheme. But it's so I can understand.
I saw that. Did I post that on LinkedIn?
I think I reposted it. I didn't do
I
it.
think that-
Somebody did. It's very clever.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
But I can, if the university's business model is, we're producing people who are thinkers, okay. But but architecture is actually a vocation, and it's at the end of it, it's a specific job. It's like training to be a doctor. And you're saying we're teaching you medicine so you can go out and be a talk show host. Well, there's a couple of them, but the general aim is you're going to learn medicine.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's it. The education system is deeply intertwined with the you becoming a profession. It's RIBA accredited. It's like you have to go through it at the moment to become an architect. For the most part, it was the most common way to get to become a professional, and there is this kind of disconnect between what happens inside of academia and then becoming an architect. And it's not only that, I will be quite critical of education, because one of the big complaints that we'll hear from the profession and from businesses is that students, by and large, are just not ready for the profession in any kind of way. And part of the reason why the salaries are so low is because, number one, you've got this oversupply. Number two, they can't do anything inside of a business, so they don't have much economic value for the business, because now the business feels like they have to train people, certainly with part ones, to be able to do stuff, and that becomes very, very problematic. And me as a business consultant, when we're looking at, particularly with smaller businesses, I encourage them to hire more senior people first, as opposed to going straight in for loads of part ones because they're cheaper. Because it's like, yeah, but give you 6 months, you're going to be complaining about how your team can't do anything, and how you've become basically like a little studio unit of education where you're teaching people the ropes of architecture and you're not getting any work done, and now your profits are going to slide, and then everyone gets fed up because they can't get paid anything.
Well, exactly. It's a bit of a loop at the moment. So either I was talking to last night. I was talking to a part one who just come out after the degree, and they're having no luck finding work. And I always feel terrible for them. I do.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been there, haven't we? And I said, look, if you really want to know what practices are interested in, do you understand construction? Do you understand materials? So I set him a little task. I said, go and find out what a vapor barrier is, and where it's used. So no, they call it a vapor barrier. What they call it, the vapor control layer. Thank you. And he looked at me, and I said, well, if you know what that is, I said, that's a good, it's a bit of a litmus test. I know a couple of architects who use that one. Like,
Mhm.
what's a vapor control area? Where's it used? And he looked at me and I said, so at very least go and find that one out. And the other thing I say is join CPD, understand materials, understand building regulations, because at least the more you can demonstrate that you've at least looked into that side of things. But I think we talked about this before, but I really want to do a piece of research on this, but I don't think the RIBA would be interested. But how do architects get selected? If you think about it, and I thought about, well, are they selected by the idea of being an architect? And I thought, well, not really, because unless you're the child of an architect, or, and there's obviously a few of those, but I would have thought the majority wouldn't really know what architecture is. They probably got it off the telly and watching Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, well, no,
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's a subject as well that you enter into and you don't really know what on earth it is.
So you don't, so that you're not, your kind of personality type and your attitude, your aptitude is not selected at that stage. It's selected because you do maths, physics, and arts or something. Then I think, okay, there's a 50% dropout rate, we all know, from start to finish. So how do people get selected out or select themselves in? And I think, well, so it's either that. So it can't be that. So it comes to the conclusion, it's the actual process itself that selects them. So that the crit process, the way that architects are trained, there will be people dropping out at various points because either it's just too difficult, it's not for them, which is fair enough, or that, you're putting your stuff on the wall and getting slated for it time after time is a way of, kind of like, it's a bit like boot camp, isn't it? And at the end of it, you're going to end up with 50% of people who intend to be an architect. And I think, well, at what point have we actually said to these people, right, that's what you need to know? And I think, because the universities kind of argue, well, the degree isn't about that. And the stock answer seems to be from a few people in academia, I mean, well, it's up to practitioners to train for that. And I'm going, no, it isn't. I mean, you have to, I had a discussion with one guy at UCL, and I say, look, the Building Safety Act is going to change everything, all right? The way the building regs works, Part L, Part B, it's going to overturn the way architects are trained. It's obvious. But his response was, well, they learn that when they go to practice. Yeah, but you're going through this process designing buildings without the first knowledge about, Part B, then it's a fiction. It's a fiction.
It's wild, and this is the most common complaint as well. From employers is that the students, their young architects, don't have any knowledge of. They don't know how to architect, right? And so, I mean, this is the other thing about the kind of question of the regulation of function or wider protections. When you're like, well, one of the big issues that the architecture industry has itself is it's not producing competent architects. From the education, and it's left up to the businesses, and then obviously a business has to be. I mean, I often talk about it with people about earning the right to be an educator in your business, in the sense that the profession is very nice, and I know a lot of architects love teaching, and that's great, but your business isn't a school, in the sense that you've got to be very careful, because you've got to be very careful, particularly as a small business, taking on lots of inexperienced architects. And I appreciate you love teaching them all, but then it's at the expense of you making money. And then everyone's complaining about having low fees and all this kind of stuff, and there's a lack of experience. So, larger businesses have more capacity to be able to do really good Part 1 programs and make sure that everyone's got all of the education that they need and all that kind of stuff. But then what the hell are students doing for 7 years? Like, I mean, I'd be more sympathetic to this argument that the businesses that you learn on the job. If architectural education wasn't 7 years of somebody's life,
and 5 of those years at how much a year? I mean, if one of these young people went to a bank and said, I want to buy a BMW 7 Series or an Audi, a high top line Audi, and the banker says, so, yeah, okay, so what's your income? Oh, I'm a student. And they're going to go, yeah, okay, well, listen, good luck with studies. Come back when you get a job and we look at a bank loan. But it's almost like, oh, you want to study architecture? That's like best part of 100 grand, or it is, yeah. How much do you want? Do you want some more? It's like, why isn't there a cooling off period for this? It seems to me, and as you say, when I see so many practitioners that they do teach, I'm thinking, are we getting back into a pyramid scheme? It's sort of, you shouldn't have time for that. I mean, if you get later on in your career and you're the sort of, very experienced, and there's a few architects like that. And yeah, absolutely, you need the wisdom and knowledge of somebody who's been practicing for 30 years to go in and say, look, this is what it's about. Give you the kind of Marcus Aurelius bit, like think about it. But it's almost like the professional moment would rather talk about anything else except the people who are actually running the practices. There was an event. I'll be careful here, but it's the event I was chairing, and there was a part 3 student, a part 2 studying for part 3, responding to something saying, well, if practices didn't focus on profit and almost spat the word out, then maybe they could do more social good. And I just said, I looked and I said, well, first of all, before we put this to the panel, give me another word for profit. Give me another word. What's another word for profit? I said, because that's used pejoratively. I said, how about use the word surplus? Any business has to make surplus because of thing called cash flow. And it's like, if you don't understand the basics of that, that's how you go out of business. You have to make profit or surplus. People aren't buying yachts. They're not buying private jets. Most architects, they're basically just having some reserve in the bank for the ups and downs of fees. I said, I could tell you the warning signs as an employee you need to look out for if business has got cash flow problems. But it was sort of this kind of, how could you get to that point and be that naive? I mean, we're not talking about an 18-year-old now. We're talking about he's 26. And I said, to put it in perspective, at the age of 26, my dad had been through 4 years of a world war. And he grew up fairly quick. And this sort of almost senses a bit of an extended childhood, almost sense a feeling. I could get a feeling it is like that. And they want to be protected from the realities. And the fact is, it's Darwinian. And it always has been, and it always will be. And the people who can see, I want to get ahead here, I have to basically leapfrog over people who don't want to think this way.
Yeah.
Then, to be honest, that's what I'd have thought. I'd have thought they're just people that can, run past or jump over. So it's this feeling somehow that people have got to come in and fix it for adults, and it doesn't work like that.
No, and exactly. I mean, this is a kind of message that we try and put out here on a BOA of, we can be the authors of our own destiny. And really, if we've got massive complaints about fees and our salaries, then we need to take ownership over it. And if you're owning a business, okay, you've got some direct agency there to be able to control your fees because you're the one setting them. And if you're an employed architect, you also have some agency in your salaries, but you need to learn what is controlling your salaries, which is fees, and how to provide more economic value to the company that you're working at. And it's interesting here at BOA. I work with both employees and with business owners, having that conversation. But it's that's that individual ownership over it, and not waiting for somebody else from above to come down and help us. That will hurt us. That wanting, the RIBA to come and save us. That will hurt us.
It's not their job.
Yeah.
That they're a professional body. They can facilitate things, and they can identify trends and needs, and they can find ways to help profession do that. But all these are separate businesses. This isn't a, like I say, they're not a trade union, but I'm not, I'm not trying to sort of completely defend the RIBA in this one, but I can see the point that what my viewpoint is, we need to put resources into addressing these as a profession, and the only vehicle there is the RIBA. There is no other vehicle. So, and if they're doing things like guerrilla tactics, for instance, so they're already contributing to this. So in other words, and if they're sending advice notes out on salaries, then they're already talking about it. Well, what's to stop us going further? But it's funny because, me, I've worked on, spent a lot of time in consumer, and I'm a big believer in storytelling as a way to increase value. Because obviously, marketing, you've only got price or differentiation. I always say, like, architects have it 50% more difficult than marketers, because marketers have got price and differentiation, where architects have got commodity firmness and delight. So you got, so like a Vitruvian principle of marketing. So, well, let's put them together and have a 5-stage Vitruvius, commodity firmness, delight, price or differentiation. What is it? But it's kind of, to me, it's like there are some fairly obvious moves, because there's loads of work out there done by Kahneman. I mean, Rory Sutherland, who you interviewed in a fantastic podcast, I love that. He's really good at this, and he is like the modern guru, isn't he? He's astonishingly funny as well, and his insights. But you have to look for different ways, the strategies to increase value, and that happens everywhere. And people, as Kahneman sort of said, people make emotional decisions for rational reasons. Okay, so what you've got to get them into a position where they really want something, and then they'll find ways to argue it's worth that extra bit more, or 25% more, because that's what I want. It's like these things, right? Apple iPhones. I mean, ludicrously expensive things. I mean, I'm talking on a Mac now, which is ludicrously expensive, and yet people go, "Oh yeah, but it's so intuitive." I go, what Android isn't? I mean, it's like, no, you just like the Apple. It's got cachet. It's got kudos. It says creative.
It's got status.
It's got status, and it's it's like the Jaguar kind of situation at the minute. It's like it's all emotion. Okay, didn't even show a car. It's like people with pom poms on their ankles, sort of looking askance at the camera. Deeply inspired by Eurovision or Boney M, I think actually.
Eurotrash.
Like, yeah, exactly. Eurotrash. Like, copy nothing except Eurotrash, Boney M, Eurovision. Every Rona Martin's laughing from the 60s. I mean, it's like, do me a favor. So I gave him an example at this. I talked about sales and said, okay, how do you take a product that's worth X, and let's just say it's a consumer product, and how do you figure how do I get to charge 4X for the same thing, exactly the same thing, just by packaging it differently? And the way you do that is you tell a story that resonates in their minds and in the context of the way they think. And I always think to myself, if 50% of, or more than 50% of architects' fees are earned through one-off housing extensions and alterations, then you're dealing with consumers. That's a B2C thing. Now, if their point is we don't want to pay too much to the architect, I mean, why are we exploring areas of like how to destroy value in your house? How to give yourself a long-term problem. It just strikes me we're not examining some of the psychological aspects of. I mean, obviously there's the business aspects about you build your business on work you turn away, but also the subtle emotional triggers, psychological triggers, and there's a lot of work on this. I mean, Nobel Prize winning guys like Thaler and Kahneman and I can see Rory Sutherland ending up if he did a PhD in it, he'd probably get a Nobel Prize for it,
Well, it was interesting, when I spoke with him and we were discussing like selling sustainability, for example, and he was using the example of Elon Musk and Tesla, and how Musk is so good at making sustainability cool, and the kind of idea and the idea of novelty, and kind of having a sustainable product, and then having something ridiculous and unnecessary about it, like bulletproof glass in the Cybertruck windows, or the dog mode in the Tesla as well. There was kind of these novelty factors that kind of just make an object very seductive and and it being a very interesting way of kind of associating that with this other sustainable agenda, and elevating it, and wrapping it up in these things that humans get emotional about.
And that's all for now. Please stay tuned for part 2 of this brilliant inspirational conversation with Paul Iddon.
Hey, Enoch Sears here, and I have a request. Since you are a listener here of the Business of Architecture podcast, Ryan and I, we love putting this podcast together. We love sharing information as much as we can glean from all the other industries that we're a part of to bring it back to empower you as an architect and a designer. And one thing that helps us in our mission is the growth of this podcast, simply because it helps other architects stand for more of their value, spreads the business information that we're sharing to empower architects together, so architects, designers, engineers can really step into their greatness, whatever that looks like for each individual. And so here my simple ask is for you to join us and be part of our community by doing the following: heading over to iTunes and leaving a review of the podcast. And as an expression of our sincere thanks, we would like to give you a free CEU course that can get you one professional development unit, but more importantly, will give you a very solid and firm foundation on your journey to becoming a profitable and thriving architect. So here's the process for that. After you leave us a review, send an email to support@businessofarchitecture.com. Let us know the username that you use to leave the review, and we will send you that free training. On the training, you'll discover what 99% of architecture firm owners wish they would have known 20 years ago.
Hello, listeners. We hope you're enjoying our show. We love bringing you these insightful conversations, but we couldn't do it without the support of our amazing sponsors. If you're a business owner or know someone who would be an excellent fit for our audience, we'd love to hear from you. Partnering with us means your brand will reach over 40,000 engaged listeners each month. Interested in becoming a sponsor? Please send us an email at support@businessofarchitecture.com. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you be unstoppable.